The twin suns of the imperial capital burned red over the marble plaza, casting long shadows across rows of soldiers standing like statues. Thousands of citizens gathered behind shimmering energy shields, their faces pale and silent. The air was thick with heat and fear. In the center of the plaza stood three women, chained to metal poles beneath the Empire's golden banner. They were the daughters of General Marcus Kane, a man once called the Butcher of Vorn, the human who had defeated 5 fleets in a single day. Years ago he had vanished into exile, his name erased from all records. But now the Empire had captured the only family he had left. The oldest, Arya, stood tall even in chains, her black hair cut short, her eyes full of defiance. The second Lyra, the quiet one, kept her head bowed, whispering to herself as if praying. The youngest, Mira, was barely 19, her lips trembling as she looked at the mass of armed guards around them. A cold metallic voice echoed from the grand balcony above. By order of Emperor Talek III, these traitors are found guilty of treason against the Galactic Empire. The crowd gasped as the Emperor himself stepped into view, tall and thin, wrapped in robes woven with living gold threads. His face was hidden behind a mask of polished steel. "Their crime," he said slowly, "is aiding rebel cells and spreading human defiance." He paused, his eyes gleaming behind the mask. "Their punishment, death by blaster fire." Mira cried out, "We are not rebels. We helped civilians escape. That's all." Her voice shook but carried through the plaza. The Emperor raised a hand, and the guards struck her down to her knees. The crowd stayed silent. None dared speak. Above them, a massive imperial banner fluttered in the dry wind, its shadow falling like a grave over the three sisters. Far away, deep beyond the Empire's borders, on a forgotten moon surrounded by dust storms, an old Cums tower flickered to life. A man sat inside a dark bunker, his face lit by the blue glow of a monitor. His hair was gray, his body covered with scars that looked carved by time and war. When he heard the transmission, he didn't move, not at first. He listened as the Emperor's voice repeated the sentence. The feed showed the three women standing proud, even in chains. The man's fingers trembled against the table. "Arya," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Then he heard the youngest cry again, "Myra," and something inside him snapped. The name Marcus Kane was spoken in the dark again, the name the Empire had erased from every record. Every scar on his body seemed to burn. He slowly stood, the metal plates on his armor catching dust and light. "Bring up the ship," he said, his voice low as thunder. "Wake the crew." Back on the capital world, the executioners took position. 6 soldiers in black armor raised their rifles, energy cores humming. Arya lifted her chin, and for a moment the crowd saw her smile. She looked up at the sky, whispering, "He'll come." The Emperor tilted his head. "Who will come, traitor?" She did not answer. The drums stopped, silence fell. And then the Emperor spoke. "Fire!" The sound of 6 blasters cracked the air. Red light flashing like lightning, the 3 bodies fell without a scream. The crowd gasped, some turned away, others cheered because fear forced them to. The imperial anthem played loud, covering the smell of burnt flesh. The Emperor looked down and said softly, "The line of Cain is ended." Then he turned and walked away, leaving only ashes and silence. But deep in space, something ancient began to move, beneath the surface of the forgotten moon. Giant steel doors groaned open for the first time in 50 years. Dust cascaded into a vast underground hangar. At its center rested a ship like no other, black, scarred and silent. Its name burned faintly across the hull. Iron Spectre, Marcus Kane walked toward it, his boots echoing on the metal floor. Each step was slow, heavy, and filled with purpose. He stopped before the ship, and placed his hand on its hull. The AI voice activated with a soft tone. "Welcome back, General Kane. Status quo sleep. Systems offline." He closed his eyes. "Not for long," he said. The old crew quarters lit up one by one. Faces of men and women who once followed him to hell and back blinked awake from cryosleep. They stepped out, shivering, confused, until they saw the general standing before them. "Sir?" One whispered, "Is it time?" Kane nodded. "They killed my girls," he said. And the room fell into silence. Every soldier straightened. No questions, no fear. Only vengeance. The engines of the Iron Spectre rumbled like the growl of an angry god. Flames erupted beneath the moon's surface. Dust turned to glass as the ship rose into the night. The stars reflected across its hull like cold fire. The galaxy would soon remember the name it tried to bury. Back on the capital, the Emperor celebrated victory, unaware that across the void, a storm was forming. Imperial sensors picked up a faint signal, a transmission in an ancient Terran code. 3 words repeated endlessly through static. "Blood for blood." The officers dismissed it as ghost data, but in the deep silence between stars, the message kept echoing, growing louder. The Deathworlders were awakening again, and on the bridge of the Iron Spectre, Marcus Kane opened his eyes and whispered, "They took my daughters. So now I take their empire." The engines roared, and the black ship vanished into the night, leaving only dust, silence, and the promise of vengeance. The stars over the forgotten moon turned crimson as the Iron Spectre tore free from its hangar. Engines ignited like suns reborn, sending shockwaves through the dust clouds. In the cockpit, Marcus Kane sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the void ahead. The light of the monitors flickered across the scars on his face. Lines etched by war, loss, and time, the crew moved with practiced precision. Even after 50 years in cryosleep, they didn't need orders. They already knew why they had been awakened. Kane's voice broke the silence, deep and calm. "Set course for the Imperial core, cloak active, all systems hot." The ship's AI responded softly. "Acknowledged, General Kane." Stealth protocol engaged. The Iron Spectre vanished into the darkness, disappearing from all scanners, as if swallowed by the stars themselves. The galaxy had forgotten what humans could do, but now it would remember. In the mess hall, the old crew gathered around flickering holoscreens. Images of the execution replayed over and over. The soldiers watched in silence as Arya, Lyra, and Mira fell to the ground. No one spoke. One of the gunners, a tall woman named Briggs, clenched her fists until her gloves creaked. "They made us ghosts," she said, "and now they've given us a reason to haunt them." A low murmur of agreement spread across the room. Kane stood in the doorway, his presence filling the space like gravity. "We are not ghosts," he said, his voice steady and cold. "We are reminders." The room went still. He looked at each of them, veterans of a forgotten army. "The Empire thinks we're dead. They think Earth is dust. But we still have one thing left they can't destroy: justice." The ship's systems hummed louder as its engines charged. The reactor core pulsed like a beating heart. Deep and alive, Kane walked to the armory. The lights flickered on row by row, revealing walls of Terran weapons, forged in the old wars. Each rifle bore a carved insignia, the emblem of the Ghost Division. A white skull on black steel. He ran a hand over one of the rifles, feeling the grooves where his name was engraved. "It's been a long time." "Old friend," he whispered. The AI interrupted. "Incoming transmission detected. Encrypted Imperial channel." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Play it." A hologram flared to life. The Emperor's voice filled the bridge, cold and triumphant, to any who still believe in the legend of Marcus Kane. "Know this: his daughters are dead, his bloodline is ended. The age of the Death Worlders is over. The message ended, leaving static and silence. Briggs stepped forward, her eyes burning. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Kane nodded. "I say we prove him wrong," she said. Kane turned to his crew, his voice rising. "We don't make threats. We make examples." His words echoed across the bridge. "Plot a course to the nearest Imperial garrison. Let's start by taking their communication hub. If the galaxy wants to remember Earth, let's give them something they'll never forget." The Iron Spectre moved through the void like a phantom. Its engines left no trace. Its weapons primed for silent war. Hours later, the ship dropped out of warp near a small Imperial outpost orbiting a dying sun. It was a listening post, hundreds of soldiers. A fleet of patrol drones, the perfect target. "Cloak stable," said the pilot. "We're in position." Kane nodded. "Launch the drones." Dozens of small black spheres launched from the ship. Gliding soundlessly across the void, they latched onto enemy hulls and powered down. Waiting for the command, Kane raised his hand and said softly, "Light them up." The night exploded. Every drone detonated in a chain reaction. Fire lit the darkness like dawn. The outpost broke apart, its fragments burning like stars. The Imperial fleet never even got to fire. Their last recorded words were panic and static. Inside the Iron Spectre, the crew watched the destruction unfold. The AI spoke calmly. "Target neutralized. 0 survivors." Kane didn't smile. "Send the message," he said. A transmission burst through every Imperial channel across 10 systems, repeating one line in a voice made of steel and fury. "You shot my daughters. Now I shoot your empire." The Emperor's advisors panicked. Commanders scrambled, fleets redirected. The name Marcus Kane began appearing again in secret reports, redacted, classified, and feared. "The Death Worlder has returned," one admiral whispered. "The Baba Yaga walks again." Kane stood at the viewport. Watching the burning debris fade into dust, he remembered his daughters' faces. Arya's defiance, Lyra's quiet courage, Myra's trembling smile. He closed his eyes. "You didn't die for nothing," he said under his breath. Then he turned to his crew. "We move fast, we hit hard, and we vanish. The Empire wants a ghost story. Let's give them one." The crew saluted. For the General, for Earth, the Iron Spectre leapt into hyperspace. Vanishing once more, across the galaxy, rumors spread. Fleets destroyed, outposts silenced, and one recurring message left behind, a white skull painted in blood on every wall. Every soldier who saw it whispered the same thing. "The Baba Yaga has returned, back on the capital." The Emperor smashed his cup against the wall. "Find him," he roared. "I want his head." His advisor hesitated. "Your Majesty, he's not just a man. He's a Death Worlder." The Emperor's hands shook. "Then we'll burn every world he hides on." But somewhere in the dark, Marcus Kane was already watching them. Waiting, planning, his vengeance had just begun. And the galaxy was about to learn what happens when you make war against a human who has nothing left to lose. Asterisk, the Empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. Its fleets darkened the skies of every colony. Its armies walked like iron storms across the ground. For centuries, no one had dared to challenge it, not until Marcus Kane returned. The first explosions in the border sectors were dismissed as pirate attacks. Then communications fell silent, stations vanished, and Imperial fleets began dying in the dark. Each wreck carried the same mark, a white skull drawn in ash across twisted hull plates. The officers who saw it whispered in fear, "The Baba Yaga walks again." On the capital world, panic grew behind the polished walls of the Senate. Admirals argued, scientists searched for logic, but there was none. Ships were vanishing faster than the Empire could build them. At the heart of the Iron Spectre, Kane stood over a holographic map filled with glowing red dots. Each red light was an Imperial ship destroyed. He said nothing, his eyes cold, his hands steady on the console. His crew watched in silence, waiting for his next move. "Next target," he said quietly. The AI answered, "Imperial Communication Hub." "Sector 9, Kane nodded. "Cut the head." The body falls. Hours later, the ship emerged from hyperspace behind a massive Imperial station, its silver spires glittering against the blue of a nearby star. Inside, thousands of soldiers worked in perfect order. Unaware that death was already in their orbit, Kane gave the order. "Launch the decoys." A fleet of phantom drones spread out, sending false readings across every radar. When the enemy opened fire on empty space, the Iron Spectre fired back. The first salvo tore through the station's defense grid. The second vaporized its weapon platforms. By the time the alarm sounded, the battle was already over. The crew aboard the Iron Spectre watched the station break apart like glass. Kane turned to his communications officer. "Broadcast," he said. A message pulsed through the void, repeating again and again across Imperial frequencies. "You cannot hide behind stars. You cannot silence blood. The Empire made a mistake." The message reached the Emperor's palace within the hour. His throne room filled with generals bowing low. "He is hitting us at random," said one. "No," replied another, trembling. "He's not random. He's erasing our chain of command." The Emperor's masked face turned toward the stars. "Then we erase him first," he said. "Every ship, every weapon, every spy. I want them hunting Kane across the Empire." Fear began to bloom like a virus on frontier worlds. Civilians whispered human stories like old myths. "The Death Worlders are back," they said. "The ones who fought the gods and won." Imperial soldiers refused to patrol alone, and some even deserted. The name Marcus Kane was no longer a secret. It was a warning, meanwhile, aboard the Iron Spectre. Kane sat in his quarters, staring at 3 medals laid out on a table. Each one belonged to one of his daughters. The smallest was Myra's, engraved with her name and the words "Bravery Beyond Fear." He reached out and closed his hand over it. His breath trembled, then steadied. "I'm not finished yet," he whispered. Sergeant Briggs entered quietly. "Sir?" "The men want to know our next move." He didn't look up. "We go for their pride," he said. "Their shipyards, their capital lines, the places they think are untouchable." Briggs nodded. "That'll break them." Kane shook his head. "No. That'll remind them who they angered." 3 days later, the Empire's largest shipyard burned. Millions watched from nearby colonies as the flames lit the void. The broadcast reached every system before it was cut. Kane's voice echoed through the feed. "Calm and merciless. You built an empire on fear. Now feel what you created." The reaction was immediate. Fleets pulled back, trade halted, entire sectors fell into chaos. The Emperor declared martial law, blaming rebels and outlaws. But the people no longer believed him. In taverns and marketplaces, they spoke the truth aloud. The Death Worlder was coming at night. Imperial soldiers dreamed of the old stories told to scare cadets, tales of humans from the Death World Earth, creatures that survived hurricanes, volcanoes, and wars that destroyed their own planet. To them, pain was fuel, and vengeance was oxygen. The name Marcus Kane became more than a man. It became a shadow across the stars. Inside the throne room, the Emperor stared at a projection of Kane's face, weathered, calm, unbroken. "He's only one man," the Emperor said. His advisor replied quietly, "One man was enough last time, on the Iron Spectre." The crew gathered in silence as Kane looked out through the viewport. The wreckage of another Imperial fleet drifted before them, like ash in the wind. Yara, his pilot, broke the quiet. "Sir, we're becoming what they fear." He didn't turn. Good, he said. Fear keeps them awake at night. The stars reflected in his eyes like cold fire. Somewhere deep inside, he still saw the faces of his daughters, their laughter echoing through memories now filled with rage. He whispered to himself, "You wanted to erase my family. Now I erase your name." Back on the capital, alarms screamed across the palace. Imperial sensors picked up a signal entering the core systems. The Iron Spectre had broken through their defenses. The Emperor stood from his throne, his voice shaking with fury and fear. "Impossible. How did he find us?" The answer came seconds later. A transmission appeared on every Imperial screen. The face of Marcus Kane filled the broadcast, his voice low and steady. "You wanted to know where I am? I'm already here." The feed cut to black, and then explosions began lighting up the night side of the capital world. The Empire, once untouchable, was trembling, and the galaxy was watching. Because the Death Worlders had returned. And this time they were not fighting for survival. They were fighting for vengeance. Asterisk, the capital world of the Empire burned beneath its silver skies. Fire climbed the sides of marble towers. Smoke turned the clouds black. Sirens wailed across the city, while soldiers ran through the streets shouting orders. Above them, the Iron Spectre drifted like a dark god. Silent and unbroken, its shadow swallowed the light of the twin suns. Inside the Imperial Palace, the Emperor stared at the flaming horizon. "One ship," he whispered. "One man has done this." His advisor trembled beside him. "He is not one man, my lord. He is a Death Worlder." The Emperor turned sharply, his voice shaking with rage. "Then we remind him what happens when he challenges an empire." He raised his hand. "Deploy the fleet. Across orbit." Hundreds of Imperial warships turned toward the Iron Spectre. Engines roared, weapons charged. The space around the planet filled with energy storms and flashing light. On the bridge of the Iron Spectre, Marcus Kane watched them form ranks, calm as ever. "They're learning," he said softly. "Too late, though," Sergeant Briggs grinned, her hands ready on the console. "Just give the word." "Sir?" Kane looked at his crew, the ghosts of Earth's last soldiers. Men and women who had survived wars the galaxy could never imagine. "Fire control to my command only," he said. "We hit where it hurts most." The first wave struck. Imperial cruisers fired thousands of plasma rounds, turning the sky into a sea of burning green light. The Iron Spectre shuddered, but held steady. Its shields glowed blue, sparking under the force. Kane's voice cut through the alarms. "Return fire." The Terran ship unleashed its wrath. Cannons hidden beneath its armor roared, hurling kinetic slugs the size of shuttles. Each shot ripped through Imperial hulls like paper. Within minutes, 10 ships were gone. The Emperor watched the battle feed in horror. How is that possible? He shouted, "That ship is centuries old." His advisor replied weakly, "It's not the ship, it's who's flying it." On board the Iron Spectre, the crew moved like one mind, each strike precise, every maneuver perfect. Kane ordered the AI, "Activate the drone swarm." Hundreds of sleek black machines burst from the ship's belly, moving faster than sight. They tore into the Imperial fleet, slicing through armor, planting charges, exploding in brilliant flashes. Briggs laughed. "They wanted a war, sir. We're giving them extinction." Kane didn't smile. "No, we're giving them a lesson." He said, his voice dropped to a whisper, "Never touch what belongs to humanity." Down on the planet, civilians watched in awe as fire rained from the heavens. The Imperial capital, once untouchable, was crumbling. One child pointed to the sky and whispered, "Is that the Death Worlder?" His mother pulled him close, eyes full of tears. "No, that's vengeance," she said. The Emperor's command ship, the Solar Crown, finally entered the battle. 10 kilometers of gold armor and arrogance. The Emperor himself took command. shouting into the combs, "Target the Terran ship. All batteries fire." Beams of pure energy lanced through the void, slamming into the Iron Spectre. Its shields flickered, metal groaned, alarm screamed. But Kane stood firm. All power to the core. He said, "Let's finish this." The reactor pulsed like a living heart. Blue fire rippled across the ship's surface as the ancient Terran weapon systems reached full charge. "Weapon ready," said the AI. "Primary railgun at maximum load." Kane's eyes narrowed. Then fire. The shot that followed split the stars. A beam of molten metal and plasma punched straight through the solar crown. The Emperor's voice cut out mid-command. The ship erupted in a storm of fire and light. The explosion tore the clouds apart. Lightning flashed across the sky, and every Imperial screen went black. On the Iron Spectre, silence filled the bridge. The crew stared at the fading light of the explosion. Briggs whispered, "It's over." Kane shook his head slowly. "No, it's just the beginning." He opened a channel to all Imperial systems, his voice calm and cold, echoing across millions of frequencies. "You built your empire on fear, on pain, on blood. Now you know what real fear is. This is the wrath of humanity, and it does not forgive." Throughout the Empire, the broadcast played endlessly. Entire worlds paused. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Even the loyalists began to whisper that the age of the Empire was ending. In the darkness of space, Kane walked alone to the viewing deck. Below him, the ruins of the capital glowed red and gold. He thought of Arya, Lyra, and Mira. He imagined them watching from the stars, smiling through the firelight. "It's done," he said softly. "I kept my promise." Sergeant Briggs approached, her voice gentle. "What happens now, sir?" Kane looked out at the endless galaxy. "Now," he said, "we rebuild what they destroyed, one world at a time." The Iron Spectre turned slowly from the burning world. Its engines flared like suns as it vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind silence and the ashes of an empire. But across the galaxy, others were watching. Rebellions sparked on distant planets. Enslaved species rose with newfound courage. And wherever the symbol of the white skull appeared, people whispered one name. Baba Yaga, the Death Worlder, had become more than vengeance. He was hope wrapped in fire, the proof that humanity, once broken, could never truly die. The flames of the Empire's capital had faded into cold smoke. But the echo of Marcus Kane's vengeance still thundered across the stars. Entire sectors lay silent. Fleets drifted like ghosts, and the Emperor's throne sat empty. What was once the heart of the galaxy's power had become a graveyard of its own pride. On the edge of the Orion Rift, the Iron Spectre glided through a sea of shattered debris. The old Terran warship carried scars from every battle, armor scorched, hull cracked, lights dimmed, yet it still moved with purpose, steady and strong. Like the man commanding it, Marcus Kane sat alone on the bridge, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Hundreds of systems blinked red. Now free from Imperial control, the rebellion had spread faster than fire in dry grass. Worlds that once bowed to the Empire were now rising under a single name, the Death Worlder. Sergeant Briggs stepped onto the bridge, her armor dented, her face weary but proud. "It's done, sir," she said. "The Empire's command is gone. Their fleets are scattered." Kane nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "No empire truly dies. Briggs, it just waits to rise again." She frowned. "And what will we do when it does?" He turned to her, eyes like steel. "Then we remind them why they fear us." Outside, the ship's engines pulsed softly, their glow reflected in Kane's eyes as he looked out at the horizon of stars. "Earth is gone," he murmured. "But humanity isn't. We live in every act of defiance, every fight for freedom. That's what they'll never understand." Across the galaxy, the broadcast of Kane's message continued to play, his calm, cold voice speaking to all species. "You built your peace on chains. You thought fear would keep you safe. You forgot who taught the stars to burn. Rebel fleets carried that message into new systems. On distant worlds, soldiers painted white skulls on their armor, not out of fear, but out of pride. The symbol of the Deathworlders had become the mark of resistance. In the ruins of the Imperial Palace, survivors searched through the wreckage. Among the ashes, one found a small metal badge, the insignia of the Iron Spectre. It was broadcast across the galaxy as proof, and with it came a whisper. The human general still lives. Weeks passed. The Iron Spectre moved from system to system, not as a destroyer, but as a protector. It helped free colonies, reconnected trade routes, and defended small worlds from what remained of the Empire's forces. For the first time in centuries, humanity was no longer seen as monsters, but as guardians. Yet Cain never smiled. The fire in his eyes never dimmed. Late at night, he sat alone in his quarters, holding the 3 medals of his daughters. His thumb traced the names engraved on them: Arya, Lyra, and Mira. He whispered softly, "I kept my promise, my girls. I made them remember you." Sergeant Briggs found him there, standing before the viewport where the stars shimmered like candles. "We've done more than anyone thought possible," she said. "You gave the galaxy back its courage." Cain looked at her, a faint shadow of a smile on his lips. It was never courage they lost, Briggs, it was hope. Suddenly, the ship's AI interrupted. "General, long-range sensors detecting movement near the Lyrian border. Unidentified fleet approaching." Cain straightened. "Imperial survivors?" The AI paused. "Unknown signatures, but formation suggests military." Briggs sighed. "It never ends, does it?" Cain shook his head slowly. "It's not supposed to. As long as evil breathes, humanity has work to do." He placed the medals back into a small box and sealed it. "Prepare the ship," he said. "Full power." "Battle stations," Briggs smiled. "Yes, sir. Let's show them the galaxy still has nightmares." The Iron Spectre powered up once more. Engines roared, lights brightened, cannons turned toward the distant stars. The legend that had burned empires was rising again. Across the galaxy, thousands of voices whispered the same name: Baba Yaga, the Deathworlder, the man who came from a forgotten world to challenge gods. On one remote colony, a child pointed at the night sky, watching a streak of blue light tear through the heavens. "Mama," he said, "is that him?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "Yes, my son, that's the man who made the stars afraid." As the ship entered hyperspace, the stars stretched into lines of white fire. Cain stood at the center of the bridge, his reflection merging with the light. "This isn't revenge anymore," he said softly. "It's a reminder that humanity endures." The AI spoke quietly. "Destination locked, General. Course set," Cain replied. "Then let's go to work." The Iron Spectre vanished into the abyss, leaving behind only a trail of light, a ghost in the void, a promise written in fire, and across the endless night of space. One truth echoed again and again through every world, every ship, every whisper. The Empire made one mistake. It forgot why the galaxy fears humans.